Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, we have part one of our set review for Marvel superheroes this week. How are you feeling?
We certainly do. New set time is always an exciting time for us cubers.
Yeah, always a good chance to talk about some awesome, cool, new, exciting cards for everyone's favourite format, Cube. So today will be part one of our Cube set review. There will be a card gallery down in the show notes below if you want to follow along. If you're listening to the podcast, there will also be a video version on YouTube if you want to see all the pretty cards move around the screen in real time. But while you're down in the show notes, also please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review, a thumbs up, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Today, we are going to be covering white, blue, and black, and then next time we're going to be covering everything else. And this is actually quite a big set because not just is there a standard legal set, there's a bunch of commander decks and also a jumpstart product.
Yeah, it looks cool. Certainly a lot of material. I'm not going to lie to you, I still don't fully understand what jumpstart is or means, but we're looking at some cards from it.
It's their intro product, but yeah, it just means a few more cards to go over. Before we jump into the set review, let's actually touch on how we evaluate cards for these set reviews. So the way we evaluate them is that we're comparing every card in this set to every card ever printed. This isn't standard, this isn't modern, this is Cube. Our pool is every card ever printed. Our ban lists are self-enforced. When we are evaluating specific cards, we're generally trying to describe the type of cube that card could go in, and with that we generally have 3 rough buckets that we tend to talk about. We have high-powered cubes, which are looking to just run the best of the best. So with this, think the Mitgo Vintage Cube or the Arena-powered cube. They're probably the best examples of this. This kind of power level also includes cubes that aren't actually running the Power 9, such as my main cube. Like, it doesn't have Power 9 cards in it, or cards like Minsk and Boo and Fourth Aer Lingus, but it's an environment where I'm still looking for super efficient spells. Then you have the more mid-powered cubes. This is what I would say is likely the types of cubes that most people generally will have. Here you're still running some efficient cards, like you're still running things like Lightning Bolt, but you have more room for cards that you like and also cards that you own. You then have your lower-powered cubes or budget cubes. These are often where people are starting out. You're less likely to see staples from formats and more likely to see cards that have gone through standard that people might have picked up from a pre-release or picked up because they like them. I'm building a bar cube out of the cards I own, and this is very much in this category of I'm just working with what I have. These are kind of like the starting places for a lot of cubes. So if you have a cube, try and think roughly what category yours falls into, and as it'll help you work out if a card might be right for you. Also, as we go through the episode, we will touch on specifically Peasant and Pauper cubes, which are cubes made up of uncommons and commons, if we think there's any relevant cards, because these are quite popular cube formats.
Yeah, for sure. And often when we're talking about where cards fit into these different power levels of cubes, it's not about just whether a card is powerful. All the cards we're going to talk about today have the potential to be powerful, or we wouldn't be talking about them. It's often it's a question of just efficiency and how much time you get to set up in that format. So if you're consistently getting run over by turn 5 in a format, then your more expensive spells, which take a little bit of time to get going, are not gonna find a good home, even if they are powerful in the long term.
No, exactly. That's a fantastic point. But with that preamble out the way, James, we're starting off with white. Take it away with Jennifer Walters.
Yeah, sure. So first up in white, we have one of the 2-sided transform cards. So these are the ones like we saw in Spider-Man, where you can cast it on either side, or you can pay mana to transform it from the front side to the back side. So first up, we have Jennifer Walters. This is 1 white for a 2/3 legendary creature human advisor hero. It says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Very annoying effect if you enjoy counter spells. And you can pay 3 green, white, so 6 mana total, to transform Jennifer Walters, activate only as a sorcery. It transforms into the Sensational She-Hulk, which you can also just cast for 3 green, white, which is a 6/6 legendary creature gamma hero. With Reach and Trample, it also says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever a creature you control is dealt damage, you may have the Sensational She-Hulk deal that much damage to any target. Do this only once each turn. That was a lot of words. This is...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've made sure to give you all the wordy ones in part 1 anyway.
Yeah. Cunningly moving them around the spreadsheet just to set me up. So, Voice of Victory is a card we got a couple of sets ago, which I think really showcased the power of the your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Very annoying card. As well as obviously it really hoses stuff like counter spells, but it also just deprives your opponent of options. You know, it makes them make all their decisions on their turn, and then you kind of have perfect information going into your turn of what's going to happen. You know, you're playing Magic the Gathering, your opponent's playing Hearthstone. It's a good place to be. One of those games is better. That being said, the front side of this, whilst it's sort of an acceptable body, it's pretty unexciting, and not having any keywords, any other combat effects is a little bit tough, right? Just 2 mana, 2/3 in the scenarios where your opponent isn't looking to interact on your turn anyway. A bit underwhelming. The transform though is quite powerful and actually synergizes really nicely with the effect, right? Because an issue with paying 6 mana to transform your creature is always that, well, they can just kill the creature in response and you end up with nothing. Whereas this doesn't have that problem. And the flip side is powerful and will make combat a bit of a nightmare for your opponent. So you kind of know when you're sinking that 6 mana in, you're like 100% going to get an attack step with the Sensational She-Hulk, and that seems like a pretty good place to be. I think this is... I don't think this is getting into the most powerful cubes just because we already have Voice of Victory that does so much more upfront. That is just more valuable than the mana sink ability later on in most games. Like there's just going to be a decent chunk of games where you don't get to 6. But if we're looking a bit outside of those highest power level cubes, like this is a nice option. It is mostly a white card, I would view it as. I would want to have some access to green mana in my deck for sure, but this is not a card where we need to have 8 green sources in order for it to be playable, right? Because you just run it out on 2 and you find your green source by the time you're at 6 anyway. I'd be fine running this with like 5 green sources in my deck. And the flip side is powerful. This is a threatening card in the late game. Yeah, so just having that single pip on the flip is nice. But yeah, probably not one for the most efficient cubes.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this is one for more mid-powered cubes, but there I do like it. Like, it does have the nice kind of benefit of Selesnya kind of struggles, and this effectively is a free Selesnya card we can run in our white section. Because yeah, I think you're completely right on the front side, but I quite like the back. Blocking the backside, blocking the She-Hulk is utterly miserable because that ability can go face. If you attack with this, are they jumping or are they just taking 6? Or I think it makes math so miserable as well as being an annoying creature on both sides. And the front side is a 2/3 for 2 mana. Like, I know the vanilla test went out the window years ago, but like that's still quite good. Like I think this card will play quite nicely, but yeah, definitely not one for higher power level cubes. More for one that kind of like a cube that kind of like isn't really sure what its Selesnya is kind of doing. Like it's kind of hate bearsy maybe. Like maybe that's a thing we could look into, like Thalia's and that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the home for this. But yeah, a solid card. I don't think it's like ripping up trees though.
There is one rules point from this card which I found not completely obvious. I don't think we have release notes yet to clarify, unfortunately, but when the Sensational She-Hulk says whenever one of your creatures is dealt damage, they have it deal that much damage to any targets, do this only once each turn. If you're in a combat step and like 5 of your creatures are dealt damage simultaneously, does that mean I get 5 triggers? Does it mean I only get 1 trigger and I get to choose which trigger I get? To me, that's not completely obvious, I've got to say.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. My gut is that... I don't know. So my initial gut was that only one creature, like, you would pick one creature that you want to happen. But damage does happen at the same time, though. It doesn't go on the stack or anything like that.
Yeah, I think
if it's in combat anyway.
Yeah, because normally this sort of effect says this triggers only once each turn, but I think they can't say that because damage happens all at the same time in combat. So I wonder if, if a bunch of stuff damage happens at the same time, you'd get all of them, and then you just don't get future ones, or maybe you get to pick. I think it's one where hopefully once we get release notes, that'll be clarified in the rulings. But honestly, I feel like not brilliant design on that front, because I think you could read that in different ways. Seems ambiguous to me.
Yeah, definitely one for the rules notes when that comes out. I'll put a link to that down in the show notes as well, so you have clarification on that, dear listener, when it comes out. But let's keep it going. Let's move on to Night Nurse, Healer of Heroes. This is a 2/1 legendary creature human doctor hero with flash, lifelink, and when it enters, choose target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn, return it to your hand. So I think this card is quite good. We've seen this effect basically before. This is effectively I'm going to say annoyingly, technically better Samwise the Stout-Hearted, because I really like Sam. That sort of effect is generally quite flexible. Like the ability to flash this in and get back a fetch land or a strip mine has been quite nice in Power Cube. We've seen that effect do some good things. Or just get back a key threat that your opponent has answered. That's quite nice. And like that effect Sam has seen played in Power Cube, and it can get your Black Lotus back. Like it's just a nice, cool little utility creature. The flash is also nice as a surprise blocker for even more value. This does all of that, but you lose the ring tempts you that Sam has, and you gain lifelink. My gut is that that's probably better. Like purely from a card point of view, I'm a big fan of a card explaining itself. Like Sam having to have an extra token to explain what the ring tempting you does if you don't remember or you didn't play Lord of the Rings set can be a bit confusing, especially for newer players. Like for me, the annoying part though is that I love Sam as a character and I'm here for Sam. This card being a technically better version of a card we already have, a little bit frustrating to me. But if we're running the most optimal version, I think this would get in over Sam, just because it's a cleaner design, basically, is where I'm going with that. James, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I appreciate you probably don't want to hear this, but I wouldn't describe this as a technically better version of Sam. I think it's quite a lot better. Like, just adding lifelink basically for free on your 2-drop is really nice. That those points of life really do matter in a lot of matchups. The ring tempts you was pretty rarely relevant with Samwise. But yeah, this is a strong card. So we've all played with a functionally very similar card in Sam. It can do a lot of cool stuff. It can do dirtly stuff. It can do quick stuff. Often, like early game, you can use it to get back a fetch land. The strip mine is the best in class, really, isn't it? I'm a big fan of Caracas strip mine Samwise as a way to strip lock your opponent. Is quite fun.
That's a nice little package. Yeah, that's nice.
And then late game, often it pans out as you attack, you trade off a creature in combat, or it dies through a removal spell, and then you just flash in Sam and get it back, which is also a pretty nice value play. And then the body is relevant. So this is a strong effect. It'll see play in a lot of cubes. Kind of not a... it's not the most exciting card, just in that it's just an upgraded version of a card we already had. It's not really giving us access to a new effect, but it is powerful. And it's probably not an effect you want redundancy of in most cubes, right? I can't really imagine wanting to run this and Sam.
If you're on a larger cube, if you're on a 720, you have two of these now. That's nice. Like, they're both uncommon as well. So there you go. A peasant 720 cube might be where you run both of them. But yeah, annoyingly, my gut is you just run Night Nurse if you specifically want this effect.
Unless you think Sam is cooler, in which case you can run Sam.
Which is why I'll be running Sam in my cube.
I know you will. That's fine.
Future. Cool. All right. Let's keep it going, though. James, talk to us about Royal Talon Fighter Jet.
Yeah, for sure. So this is X white for a 1/1 artifact vehicle. It has flying, and this vehicle enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever this vehicle enters or attacks, create a number of 1/1 white soldier creature tokens equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. And the crew cost, crucially, at 2, which is not too bad. So if you have a bunch of mana to sink into this, it's not a bad threat, because it crews itself. and even if they kill the vehicle, you've left behind some tokens, and if they don't kill the vehicle, you're going to start pumping out tokens at a pretty good rate. That being said, it's only really gets interesting at X equals 2, right? So 4 mana or more.
If I had this in my cube, this would be under the 4-drop section pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Because at X equals 1, it doesn't crew itself, and it's making 1 token when it attacks, so that's just not that exciting. And once you're at 2, like, yeah, it's fine, but there are, better 4 drops available, right? The time I think it gets kind of interesting is if you have some additional +1/+1 counter synergies. Especially if you can put additional counters on it once it's already in play, because then you kind of get the new line, right? If I'm going to play this on turn 2, which you can't do in another deck, and then I'm going to load up the counters on it later and turn it into a really significant threat. And that just gives it way more flexibility, right? When it can or when it can legitimately be a 2-drop rather than a 4 or a 5-drop. Listen, there are probably more efficient ways to do that. You look at something like Jacked Rabbit, which obviously doesn't give you the tokens on the way in, but also just is a creature by itself, doesn't need crewing, is pretty nice, and will pump out tokens on attack even if you play it on 2. Like, this isn't quite on that level of efficiency, but I think if you're doing the counters thing, it's definitely worth considering, because the evasion, a good attack trigger. If you can get the counters piled up on this, it will be really strong.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think where I like it is, like, I see it almost as like a crossover card, because like white is quite good at tokens and quite good at counters nowadays, and I quite like the fact that it's effectively, if you're supporting like, I don't know, like red-white tokens and green-white counters, it's a nice overlap card. That's kind of primarily where I see this playing. Like, kind of without that, it kind of just reminds me a bit of like a Seeker's Chariot, which is a fine card but has generally been power crept out of like the highest battle level cubes. Yeah. If you could double it with the synergy, I like it a lot more, basically. But
yeah, I feel like this is If you're just looking at it as a 4-drop, I think this is a decent. I think Chariot's a good comparison. I think this is a decent amount worse, right? Because for Chariot, you're getting 4 power and tokens for 4 mana. Whereas this, you only get 2. Like, it's a pretty big difference.
I agree. I guess the gimmick is that this flies, but this against Chariot is quite good at beating people within the face. And you're going to ramp it out earlier because you're in green, but hey-ho. All right, let's keep it going. Let's talk about Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes. I'll give myself a nice, easy one to read here. It is a single white mana for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier hero, and it enters tapped. Love it. So this is a common, and I see this as a decent option for Pauper. Like, it's cheap, it's efficient, it has 2 power. You don't really care about blocking in the deck that wants this. It's a human as well, which could be relevant. So just there, it is going to be probably played as just a common Isamaru, basically. If this were to see play outside of Pauper cubes, it's because it's a 1-mana legendary creature. That could be relevant. Like, there's so many legendary creatures in this set, and there is a kind of legendary matters deck that's kind of been bubbling under the surface for a little bit, using things like Isamaru that I mentioned, but also specifically, I think, a card like Yoshimaru, which is a 1-mana 1/1, I believe, that gets a counter whenever you play a legendary. And also you have cards like Mox Amber, which can be a very... Effectively, in this deck, it can be a Mox. And that's quite nice. In that build, that deck wants as many cheap legendary creatures as possible. And this is 1 mana, and it's a 2/2. Like, all that deck wants to do is put as many legendaries onto the board as possible. And this is that. On top of it being a serviceable aggro creature in the vast majority of cubes, this isn't going to go anywhere near like a powered cube just because it's a Isamaru. We don't run Isamaru in that anymore. But I think a solid card for those reasons. Could be tested. Could be tested. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Mostly a worse Isamaru that you're allowed to put in a Pauper cube. I guess the only other thing to flag is this is a human. this is true of almost every creature in this set. So we're certainly not going to flag it every time. But if you have Human Tribal running in Cube, which is honestly one of the most, kind of probably the most viable tribal deck to get into cubes, then that is a true for almost every creature in the set, as I say, because I guess that's just how Marvel works. And yeah, Human Tribal better than Dog Tribal. Therefore, if that's something you care about, that might be a reason to run this over a Samaru. I wouldn't. Humans aren't better than dogs, like, but Human Tribal in the context of a cube better than Dog Tribal, I'm afraid to say.
No, very good, very true. Let's get the ball rolling, James. We're moving on to blue. Talk to us about Ironheart, Clever Champion.
Yeah, this card's kind of dope, actually. I like this one. This is 4 and a blue for a 3/4 legendary artifact creature human hero. It has Improvise, so that's the it's like Convoke, but you tap artifacts to help pay the mana rather than creatures. And it has Flying, and non-creature spells you cast have Improvise. There's some pretty cool stuff going on with this card, but also like a little bit of tension, I think. Inspiring Statuary is a card I've always wanted to try and get to work in Cube. That's for 3 mana artifact that gives your non-artifact spells Improvise. And
is very Commander.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But it's cool that it gives it ways to turn your artifacts into mana are really, really powerful, right? Look at Urza, Lord High Artificer. Look at Slayer Academy. We like these cards. This is not on the power level of those cards, but it does give you a certain flavor of the same effect, right? Where you if you go wide, you make a ton of artifacts, a ton of tokens, whatever it might be. You can turn those into mana to cast your future spells. Compare this with Inspiring Statuary. Non-creature is way less of a restriction, in fact, for non-artifact. Because the issue with Statuary, right, is it's the deck you want to put it in is the all-artifact deck, and then it can't cast your artifact spells. So it just makes it very narrow where it works. Whereas this doesn't have that restriction. I don't want to put creatures in my artifact deck anyway. Let's go ham with this guy. That is also kind of a problem, though, right? That I don't have a ton of creatures in those decks. So when I do play a creature like this that's just easy to kill, they're very often going to be able to kill it. So you will just run into those spots where it's like they've been holding their removal in his hand while you're fiddling around with your big mana artifact deck. You finally play this, they have a target for removal, and it just dies, and you didn't get that much out of it. Like, this would be a way more powerful effect if they did it like Statuary and just printed it on a generic 3 mana artifact that wasn't a creature, right? As it is, you can play it in the like slightly beat downy artifact deck with like the Kappa Cannoneer and the actual affinity ones like the Sojourner and the Krang from the last set. It certainly has a home there, but there you're not really maximizing that non-creature spells have improvised text, or you can just put it in your big mana artifact deck in the same way we do with Urza and just say, well, when it does live, it's going to be really, really powerful. I'm going to give it a try in Dual Commander Cube, I'm pretty sure. It is legendary. It does some cool stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Having this in the command zone seems fun.
The blue artifact commander slot is quite competitive. There are a lot of really good ones. But I'm certainly going to give this a try, I think.
Yeah, I quite like this card. I think it's cool. Just, as you said, being able to ramp out your artifacts early, I think is quite nice. And there's plenty of big non-creature artifacts that those decks are running. Like, it's kind of... It's a card for, like, the Tinker deck, but it doesn't have to be in a cube with Tinker, if that makes sense. It's kind of like it's a cube that wants to run a lot, or it's a deck that wants a lot of cheap artifacts and some big ones. Like, this seems quite fun with like a Portal to Phyrexia or like a Cauldron Complete. Being able to ramp one of them out ahead of curve seems pretty good. I like this card. And
for sure. Can I interest you in a Paradox Engine with this card? I'm going to play this. Ooh. I'm going to tap some artifacts, cast a Paradox Engine, cast my Mishra's Bauble, untap everything. It's going to be great.
That's very you.
My turn's going to take 15 minutes. We won't have... Yeah.
Yeah, you're
I'll be
going to
having a
time,
lovely
is what I'm hearing, James.
Yeah.
You'll be having all of the game actions, and I love that for you. Okay, tight. Let's keep going. We have another artifact creature next. Next up, we have Iron Lad, Diverging Destiny. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary artifact creature human hero with flying, vigilance, and you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you can tap it to reveal the top card of your library. If it's an artifact card, draw a card. So this is also importantly an uncommon, which is quite important because I think that's probably the ceiling for this card. Like, everyone likes looking at the top card of their library, and it's not traditionally an effect we get a ton of at uncommon. So, and in a Peasant Cube, this just seems like a decent costed flying vigilant creature with all upside. Like, Affinity is very strong in Pauper, like less so in Peasant, but it does seem like a good card to try and make that deck more viable. Like, I think especially if you're running things like artifact lands in your Peasant Cube, then this is a slam dunk because you have just more things that you're going to be drawing. Like, this is very much you attack with it, and then at the end of turn, or end of your opponent's turn, you try and draw something, and like, you do need to be hitting stuff. Like, it can't just... This can't be the only artifact in your deck, and I think you actually need a fairly dense number of artifacts to make this kind of like quite good. But like, the floor is it's a perfectly good costed creature with evasion. So yeah, if you're in a Peasant Cube and you have any kind of artifact build, I think I would give this one a go. Because because really, if we can draw like 1 or 2 cards from this, then I think we're quite happy with it.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I think you have to care about artifacts and care about attacking to a certain extent. But yeah, like this, it gets in there, it can wear the Bone Splitter perfectly well, and sometimes it'll draw you some cards, and that's fine. I wouldn't go higher than Peasant because it's pretty small, it's easy to kill, and you can't get value from it right away, right? If it was you can cast artifacts from the top of your library, that would be a very different deal. But
And it would not be an uncommon.
Very true. But yeah, the fact you have to untap means, if they just have a Burst Lightning for this, you're sad, right? But it's worth bearing in mind as well, the ability isn't sorcery speed, so specifically if you like cast this, see an artifact on top, you can't access it right away, right? Because it's a tap ability, but you can access it, use it in your upkeep before you draw that artifact to lock in your card with that Sinbad ability. So that's cool.
No, very cool one. All right, so we've had an Iron Lad. It's finally time for an Iron Man. James, talk to us about Iron Man Modern Marvel.
Honestly, when you said Iron Lad before, I hadn't clocked that was the name of the card. I assumed that was you taking the piss. I was actually just called Iron Lad. Cool.
There's some very specific namings with this set, James.
Yeah. But this one is Iron Man. Iron Man Modern Marvel is 2 blue for a 3/3 legendary artifact creature human hero. It has flying. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. And whenever Iron Man attacks, if you control another artifact creature, draw a card. So this is quite powerful. It just goes in a pretty specific home. Like, you have to be a blue go-wide artifact creature deck. That's kind of narrow. But if that's something you're pushing in your cube, and we've seen there are a lot of ways to create artifact token creatures now and go pretty wide with them, this is powerful. But it's just going to face the issue, right, that in a lot of cubes, the blue artifact deck specifically often isn't that aggressive, right? The aggressive part of artifacts is more based in red, and often blue is more doing the like big mana artifact thing, in which case you probably don't want this card. But if it fits in your cube, it is a powerful effect, right? It's an anthem for your team, and it'll get you a card if it gets your attack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've completely nailed it. Yeah, this aggressive artifact deck in blue isn't what blue's doing with its artifacts. Generally, the blue builds anyway are just trying to put as many artifacts on the board as possible and like basically profit with like construct tokens, that kind of stuff, or like a Tolarian Academy to like a bucket load of mana. That's generally what it's doing. Like, this kind of briefly was a modern deck. I think modern. I think my wife had it together very briefly, like with like Grand Architect and like Master of Ethereum. They're like kind of like other similar effects that kind of buff up your artifact creatures. And like I've been pushing like artifact aggro in Rakdos for quite a while. Like this is the third version of this effect now in blue. Maybe there's a world where I think having a Grixis aggro deck doesn't sound like it's going to work, but like maybe there's a world in the future where I try like a Dimir like I think Dimir artifact aggro could actually be quite fun. Like basically anytime I can talk about Scorpeth Lord, I will talk about Scorpeth Lord, the Warhammer card. But like yeah, like the other thing as well is like that this kind of like punchy artifact deck is going to be cheaper if you're trying to build a deck without proxying, because cards like Tolarian Academy and Mishra's Workshop are famously not budget friendly. So for more budget cubes or for more mid-powered cubes, I think there's definitely a nice package there of just like cards like Iron Man that just buff up other artifact creatures and then you turn them sideways, and that's kind of what your Dimir thing is doing. I think it could be quite fun.
I like that you clarified, because no one who isn't you or has played your cube knows what a Scorpeth Lord does.
I will be preaching the good word of Scorpeth Lord for at least another. I think there's at least 2 more cards to talk about. I'll mention Scorpeth Lord in this episode alone.
Phenomenal. If someone has that on the bingo card, then you're in luck.
Got to be on brand, James. All right, but let's keep the ball rolling then. Let's take. We have our final blue card, the Wondrous Wasp. This is 1 blue for a 2/1 legendary creature human hero with flash, flying, and wasp sting. It has, when the Wondrous Wasp enters, tap up to 1 target creature. It loses all abilities for as long as the Wondrous Wasp remains on the battlefield. So I like this card. It's cheap and it's very annoying. Just being able to turn off anything you want. Like, technically, this does answer Gut and Broadside Bombardiers. Like, it trades with Ragavan, as well as just being a cheap evasive creature. Like, that's quite nice. It is also a human, which as we mentioned, has a bunch of synergies. Although, oddly, I think I prefer this if it was a fairy. I'm assuming that just doesn't work with the flavor of the card, but like, this feels like a Lorwyn fairy to me. But yeah, for me, I think the main issue with this getting into higher power level, or no, maybe in Powered Cube, just having interaction is so important nowadays, having answers that are cheap. Maybe this just gets in because this is something cheap that blue can do to not die. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I quite like this card, actually. It seems like we're getting a lot with our 2-power Flash Flyer, you know? And it's not just turning off, activated abilities or non-mana abilities. It turns off everything, right? Like, they go turn 1 Elvish Mystic, and then you just play this guy, and the Elvish Mystic doesn't do anything. You can even bolt the
bird.
That's kind of cool. You can bolt the bird.
Wow.
You can sting the bird.
What does that mean? Okay, go ahead.
It says wasp sting, Honestly, I've learned a lot of new Marvel people during this set review. It does seem like their design process is mostly they wandered around a zoo and just every animal is, that can be something.
What are you saying about Stanley?
we demand Capybara Man right now. The Wasp seems fine, though. I think this is going to see play in pretty high power level cubes, actually, because, you need some interaction. Blue tempo decks like having some cheap evasive creatures. I think this card's pretty good. I hope it means they will finally cut the stupid Flood Pits Drowner from all the cubes, because that card seems so underwhelming to me, and it continues to be there. I like this a lot more.
What cubes is that played in? Like Peasant, sure.
Modo Vintage Cube, Arena Vintage Cube. I can't tell you. I can't explain. But yeah, this card I think is pretty good. Like it. Just the majority of creatures you're facing down now, the impactful bit is not just for power and toughness. This is going to do a lot to answer a lot of those creatures. Plus, if it is the power and toughness you care about, you at least get that tap ability. That's pretty nice. Also has some cool edge cases. Like, it does just kill a construct, which is kind of cool, because they cease to have power and toughness because that's an ability. I think this is really nice. Also has a really good natural home in the blue-black ninjas deck, which
that's cool.
is one we have seen a lot of success in Powered Cube recently, right? You can get your tap, maybe they trade off their underpowered creature, and then you can return this to hand with your ninja. You get another tap that maybe gets your ninja through a second time. That's all really nice. I think there's some good stuff going on here. I think in that blue 2-drop section, there's a ton of good options. Malcolm, I think, is by a decent chunk the best, but I think this is a very solid contender for one of the other spots.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, we're moving on to black now, James. Take it away with Black Widow Super Spy.
Yeah, so this is 1 black for a 2/1 legendary creature human spy hero. It has Menace, and whenever Black Widow deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may put a +1/+1 counter on Black Widow. If you don't, you may cast the exiled non-land card until end of turn, and mana of any type may be spent to cast that spell. So essentially, when you hit them, you exile, so you hit a spell. You can either cast that spell or you put a counter on this. This is really solid, actually. Menace is huge here. Menace, I think there are a ton of comparable black creatures, right, which can give you some advantage to their attack. Think like Corsic Bronco, for example, is one that crops up in a lot of cubes. But this Menace just means it's so much easier to get through. Even if they do try and leave 2 creatures back to double block this, they're then really opening themselves up to you just having a removal spell and getting it through anyway. The trigger's really nice. The fact that you can never hit lands is really good. That means it just makes it way more likely you're going to hit something you actually want to cast. And even if you don't, it's not like it's a complete blank anyway, because you get that counter on your evasive threat. I think this is really solid. I expect this to at least be tried in high power level cubes. It's sort of competing in that slot with Dark Confidant, Corsic Bronco, I think, as the black 2-drop value generating creatures. This is a little bit more aggressive than those. Listen, the triggers probably is a bit worse than draw a card on average, but having Menace it makes it much more of a real threat as an aggressive creatures, and again, really strong in the ninjas deck, which is something that you like to see. That deck just wants cheap evasive creatures.
Yeah, I'd agree. Just cheap menace creatures that grow in black, I've just been quite impressed with. I've only just bought bloody Super Shredder, and they've immediately gone and printed another similar sort of thing. I like this card. Yeah, it's one of these ones where, in theory, in Cube, there aren't going to be any bad cards. So, you might not hit something synergistic off of your opponent's deck, but you're not going to hit something bad, if that makes sense. I think just going to be a very solid threat that your opponent has to deal with. Otherwise, you're just going to be starting ripping their... it's a thing everyone hates. Everyone hates your opponent taking cards from your deck. There's something, quite sacred about your deck. And, discarding is one thing, but when they take the card and they can just play it, it's I think Black Widow is going to be very fun and very good to play with.
Yes, it will occasionally come up that you just hit your combo opponent's key piece and their deck is pretty neutered, which is powerful.
The card is exiled. You don't have to cast it. It'll just stay in exile. That is quite imagine against the Storm player or the Doomsday player, you hit their Thoracle and then they're just well, I concede. It will come up, basically.
Yeah, it is very relevant. It is true, though, that in general, you'd rather draw a card from your deck than your opponent's deck, right?
Yeah.
Because you put your cards in your deck to function with the other cards in your deck, right? Whereas your opponent may have a bunch of synergy cards that don't do anything for you. But yeah, so this is still a pretty powerful creature. You don't need to be hitting something good every single time because you're getting that throwing effect when you don't want to cast it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is a world where just the first, if it's not removal or card draw or something you can cast immediately, just put the counter on it and just start swinging for more damage. That will be fine. But yeah, very cool card. All right, let's keep it going. Next up, we have the first of our Doctor Dooms. By that I mean his name is Doctor Doom. It is 4 black for a 3/3 legendary creature, human scientist villain. When it enters, create 2 3/3 colorless robot villain artifact creature tokens named Doombot. As long as you control an artifact, creature, or a plan, Doctor Doom has indestructible. I did look it up. I couldn't find what plans were for ages because they've not come up as types yet, but they are new enchantment types from this set. Important to note. It also has, at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card and lose 1 life. This seems like a pretty solid finisher. Like, I've seen people comparing this to like Grave Titan, and that does pain me because I love Gravy Train, and I wouldn't cut Gravy Train for this, but I could. It's in a bit of a weird spot. Like, it's effectively a 6-drop that you want to get into play and then stick around for card advantage. My guess is that this is decent in a control deck. In a control deck, this comes down, it will stabilize you on the ground because it will have indestructible because you're going to have 2 artifacts out, and then it's going to draw you into, like, effectively, it's then giving you, like, the monarchy. You're just going to draw a card at the end of every turn, or at the end of of all of your turns for free, and that's kind of how you bring yourself back into the game. It is in a bit of a weird solid because like it's a 6-drop in black that I don't want anywhere near. Like I don't think I want it in like my reanimated deck, even like a lower powered reanimated deck, anything like that. It's a strong card. It's a strong card because it is putting a lot of power and toughness on the board, and it is drawing you cards. My gut is a little slow. Like this seems fine in like my Treat Yourself cube where you reanimate your big thing and then there's more turns afterwards. This seems good when you do your thing and there's more turns afterwards. I don't see this getting in like the Mitgo Vintage Cube or anything like that, or personally anyway, just because I think it's a bit too... Oddly, for a Universes Beyond set and with a named character, I think this is a bit too fair, actually. But James, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of like this in the slot for that sort of castable reanimation target, right? Is it in the Abomination, Grave Titan frame? You know, I do actually think this is comparable to Grave Titan, at least. So I think it's when the games where this lives, the game when Grave Titan isn't answered, it probably snowballs a little bit harder than this card because you're getting the tokens on attack as well as ETB. But if they kill your Grave Titan, you got 2 2/2s out of it. This is much harder to kill because it's indestructible. And even if they do answer it, you're left with 2 3/3s. That's a huge difference. That's 2 more. You're on 6 power, not 4 power left behind. Plus, the indestructibility, as well as being great against removal, is also just strong in that they can attack you with their giant creature. You just chuck your 3/3 indestructible on the way. Very nice. I know. I think this card's just generically quite very strong. I think for 6 mana, you're getting 9 power across 3 bodies plus a personal Howling Mine, and the Howling Mine's attached to an indestructible body. I think that is just really strong. And it's a 6 mana card. It's not going to be it's not going to be breaking cubes wide open. But I think for that slot, this is a very reasonable choice.
Yeah, I could go along with that. But that's not our only Doctor Doom, James. Talk to us about Doctor Doom Unrivaled.
Yeah, the second of our Doctor's Doom. Doctor Doom Unrivaled. Ironically, I think worse than the rival Doctor Doom.
I like this one.
2 black. Okay. Doctor Doom Unrivaled is 2 black for a 4/4 legendary creature human sorcerer villain. It has lifelink, and tap, you draw a card and lose a life. Then, if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. So, this is kind of suggesting to you that it might be good as a combo piece in your Doomsday, Thoughtless, Demonic Consultation, whatever deck, right?
Do you see what they did there, James? Do you get it?
Oh,
Do you get it? Yeah.
Shockingly, I just got that. That may be an indictment of how well I prepared for this, but I did just get that. Yeah, claiming to be good with Doomsday, I personally don't see it. Like, I cast Doomsday, I draw this, then I pass for turn and hope I untap with it. That sounds horrendous. I'm just going to kill it. And I'm going to die because I don't have any cards in my library. Listen, you could try and untap with this first and then cast Doomsday, but I don't want a Doomsday deck that can't win through a freaking go for a throat, you know? That doesn't sound strong to me. I think this is, if that's what you're after, I think this is much worse than, obviously, than Thassa's Oracle, but also than things like Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. I think this is worse than Lab Maniac for that deck, because at least Lab Maniac, you can cast it and draw a card immediately and still win that turn. That's not an option with this. I guess you could argue like this is in black, as is your Doomsday, but it's just really hard for me to picture a Doomsday deck that isn't also blue. So I don't know that gives it a huge amount of value. As a fair card, it's not completely terrible, but it is, you know, it's 4 mana, it doesn't do anything when it ETBs, and it doesn't have any sort of protection. Like, a ward ability would go a long way on this card, honestly. And it's not that you can't play 4 mana cards that don't have an ETB, but they do need to really snowball in the games where they do live, and this doesn't snowball, it just draws you some cards. Yeah, I'm not hugely high on this card, as you can tell. It's kind of cool under Agatha's Soul Cauldron, though. That would be sick. Just all you do is tap and draw cards, and then eventually you win the game because you drew so many cards. I'm here for that. But in general, I think this one's a bit tough.
No, I do agree in the highest power level cubes. I am definitely higher on this than you, and like yeah, I will. I think push back a little bit. Just I know that what you said about this being a black card, and you can't see a Doomsday deck that doesn't run blue, and I do agree with that. But just specifically, like, the mana on that deck is awful. Like, you often want to be going trip black into trip blue on turn like 3 and 4 if everything's going to plan, like that kind of stuff. And like I think the fact that specifically in terms of these effects that let you win the game with no cards in your library, you effectively have Thassa's Oracle, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and then it does kind of fall off a cliff in terms of quality. Like, this is 1 more mana than Lab Man, but I think will help keep you in a game. 4 power, 4 toughness will stabilize against like some aggressive creatures. That is something to be said. Like this does not. I'm not arguing this to be like the Doomsday answer in the Midgard Vintage Cube. I think this is cool because this lets you do Doomsday in a lower powered cube. Like this and Labman and Doomsday in a mid powered cube, I think is quite cool. I think that can be your Doomsday combo deck in a lower powered level cube because yeah, with those you both basically will have to untap or have them in play beforehand. And I think that's quite nice. And like, yeah. And yeah, that's kind of where I am with this. Like I think there was a version of this card where those abilities were separate, where it was tap, draw a card, lose a life, and then it was a separate ability, just a static. The fact that it is a tap ability, I completely agree, will mean it won't go anywhere near higher power level cubes because it guarantees effect. Like it almost guarantees you have to untap with a Doomsday, which is never where that deck wants to be.
Yeah, I would be much more interested in the card if it was tap, draw card, separate ability, the Labman ability, right? Because the thing is, Labman, you can win the game that turn, right? Because you can go cast my Labman, then like gush or whatever into my empty library. I would only be interested if I could build a pile where I didn't need to pass for turn, I think. So, for example, right, you could have a pile where you go like...
Lightning Greaves.
I was thinking I like Fort Scour myself. I mill over this, draw Shallow Grave this.
That's quite hot. Yeah,
that's cool.
I like that.
You can do some stuff there. So maybe that's something you could do. Or you could do the Soul Cauldron thing and you have some creatures in play already. I don't know. I would want something better to do than just cast it and hope it lives. Because you do run into issues with V6, right, where... because your Doomsday deck doesn't run a ton of creatures, your opponent probably is just holding some removal they haven't seen a target for yet, right?
Yeah, I do agree. Like, yeah, I think we are kind of sort of agreeing with each other, just at each other a little bit. Yeah. This is not for most cubes. I think. Like, I like this in a lower powered level cube that wants to try something cool. And like, because Doomsday is awesome and it will please, like, so some people really love Doomsday. And if you can do it in like your mid powered cube, then I think people will be happy with that. But yeah, let's keep it going. Next up, we have Grim Reaper's Scythe. This is 2 and a black for a legendary artifact. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. It also has pay 3 and a black and tap it, sacrifice 2 creatures, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So for those that listen to our episode on fixing Golgari, this is a card for a particular type of graveyard deck, and that deck is the deck that cares about cards leaving your graveyard. So this is effectively, I'm not going to say effectively this is like copy 2 or 3 of the Insidious Root style of effect that's kind of a cornerstone to that strategy. It's a card that rewards us when a creature leaves our graveyard by making us a token. We like that. That's what the deck is kind of after. On top of that, it also has some added utility as a reanimation effect, so it can actually trigger itself late game if you need some value, and that is quite nice. Importantly, this type of deck is not for the highest power level of cubes. This is more budget. This is more mid-powered. Unless you're really leaning into that Tortured Resistance style of I pay a black discard, or I pay a black swap cards around, then this can be quite strong with that type of effect. In most cubes, we're kind of in most cubes, we're combining this with cards like Bloodghast or like the other black cheap recursive threats. That kind of trade off early or go to a graveyard and then we find a way to bring them back. Me and James, I think, are both a big fan of the Insidious Root style deck. Like, we've had it both in a number of our cubes. This is a piece for that. It is better than some of the other pieces that we've got recently because it's 3 mana, it's only 1 black pip. Some of the other ones, like there's a Chalk Outline or something like that. I think that's a 4 mana 1 in green. That's less like, that's kind of like, that was what we were running to kind of pad it out. I think this is like a nice swap for that because it's a bit more it's the same kind of redundant effect, just on a slightly more, on a bit more of a useful card.
Yes, I'd go along with that. I think this is pretty good redundancy. One of the things I like about it is that those decks run into real issues when you do all this setup and then they just kill your engine piece and your deck kind of doesn't do anything. And a lot of the other payoffs we've seen recently have just been on easy to kill creatures. This being an artifact is a lot more resilient naturally. It also enables itself pretty well. Like, it's not quick, but the sack 2 creatures, which are probably going to be these tokens by that stage of the game, to get something back, which then gives you a token back on the way through. So you're going, you're not even down a body, right? And you're presumably getting something back that's a lot better than a 2/2 token. That's really a really nice addition to have if you have this in play but your engine isn't completely rolling yet. You can start spending mana on that ability. I don't know why it needs to come with a finality counter. I think Wizards should let us have fun.
Basically, James. People are exactly. They're not fun.
But yeah,
you could really slowly loop it if your creature made some more creatures when it came into play. But that doesn't let us do that. It's 4 mana. It's 4 mana.
Yeah. I want to return Eternal Witness so many times with this card, and they only let me do it once. That seems unreasonable. Listen, obviously this isn't a particularly efficient card in lots of ways. It's very 3 mana do nothing a lot of the time the turn you play it. But when the engine gets rolling, this sort of effects can be really, really powerful. Look for ways where you can trigger this without spending a bunch of mana. I'm a really big fan of like Squee Master of Death stuff in these decks, for example, because it's you just keep discarding them, you keep getting them back, and you get all this value on the way through without having to sink a bunch of mana into it.
Yeah, definitely one to look at if you're doing that creature leaving your graveyard style of deck. What do you think of this one, James? Next up, we have Hammerhead Magia Boss. Or Magia? I have no idea.
Yeah, so this is 1 black for a 2/1 legendary creature human rogue villain. You can sacrifice another creature or artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on Hammerhead. This man has the most unbelievable hairline I've ever seen, I think. Incredibly, I guess that's where the hammerhead thing comes from. Very angular. It's a vibe. This card's strong. Aristocrats really likes having 3 sack outlets, and this one can get really big. We already have Carrion Feeder, which is the single black for 1/1 that can sack a creature to put a counter on it. There's a very similar effect. But this one can block and can also sack artifacts. So I think there will actually be a decent number of decks where this is better than Carrion Feeder. And just having some redundancy in that effect is pretty nice. When you have this sort of effect in a wide board, it can make your opponent... It can just make combat kind of a nightmare for your opponent, because it's hard to trade with this in combat, because you can always... trade in some of your low value tokens to pump it, but equally it's hard to not block it because they always have to be worrying about how much damage is it if they sack their board. So yeah, this is powerful. It's good redundancy for a deck that sometimes needs it. We like 3 sack outlets. This is another strong one for that category, especially if your deck cares about sacrificing artifacts specifically as well as creatures.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is... I think you've nailed it in terms of, like... I don't think that this is as good as any of the 1-mana free sack outlets. Like, in my deck, I'd probably want Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer over this. This is probably... There's an argument that this is the best 2-mana sacrifice outlet. It's free, it gives counters, it can block, as you've said, and it does artifacts as well. Like, that's pretty good. I think you do need that aristocrat deck for this to get in. Kind of like, I've definitely found recently that kind of like, I think a Blood Artist, the drain effects, like a Blood Artist, I can like incidentally put into a black kind of grindy deck and it will do work just because of its effect. This, I think you do want, like, you are doing aristocrats if this goes in. You are looking for a sacrifice outlet at 2. And this probably is the best answer. Like, the only way this doesn't get in is if you're not a Marvel fan. Because, like, we had Umbral's Zealot recently, which I was a fan of. That's one that it's a 3/2 free sack outlet, also does artifact, and I think it's Scries. That one is good, but just the counters is so nice. Yeah, this one's probably... probably the best 2-drop sack outlet I think there is going. So expected to see it in a lot of play. Also, it is an uncommon, so this will be run it in every Peasant Cube as well. But yeah, this card will see a lot of play. If your cube cares about things dying, you're probably running this card now.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I think the reason I think it sometimes will be better than some of the 1-mana ones, like Carrion Feeder specifically, is largely the ability to block, actually.
Yeah, that's
I think
fair.
People often think about aristocrats like we're always doing this super turbo thing where we're sacking a whole bunch of stuff on turn 3 and 4 and getting in there. And you certainly can have games like that. But very often the way these decks play out, right, is even when you're behind on board, you have your like drain effects and stuff, and your stuff is just dying in combat, and you're like slowly grinding them out, you know, and attritioning your way through. And this being able to be a big blocker in those scenarios, I think, is pretty relevant.
Yeah, it's a very solid card. All right, we have a couple left before we get you all out of here. Next up, we have Ultron's Auxiliary. This is 1 and a black for a 1/1 artifact creature robot villain with menace, and whenever another artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, or an artifact card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This will be the second time I talk about Scorpeth Lord today. I like this card in lower powered level cubes, doing the artifact deck. Like, this is more aggro artifacts than, like, saving a treasure to deal a damage, that kind of thing. Like, we're turning artifact boys and girls sideways with this deck. But it's a cool deck, and it's a cool aggressive artifact deck that I think is really good in mid-powered cubes. Like, those decks can run some self-mill. Those decks can run some self-mill, or even, like, tutors, things like Entomb or Buried Alive, because a bunch of the good Warhammer 40k artifact aggro creatures have things like Unearth. So we can double dip with that. We can get a counter on this. And kind of as we mentioned when we were talking about Black Widow Super Spy, which before James jumps in is a better card than this. But like, it is a cheap menace creature that in the right deck will grow. And that is quite nice. Again, this one isn't. I go very deep on this archetype, so I know I'm a big fan of it. Which is definitely why I've added it to the list to talk about. But I think this is a very solid card, and I do quite like it. Like in my cube, a card like Patchwork Automaton has been quite nice, and that's just a cheap artifact creature. That one does have Ward 2, but it starts out as a 1/1. As a threat that just grows throughout the game, I found that to be quite impactful. And just having more of these artifact creatures in your cube will make the deck better. So just having another option here, I thought was worth mentioning.
Yeah, I sort of wrote down that this card was quite narrow, but also I've died to Scorpeth Lord so many times now that I have just developed a begrudging respect for this strategy. It can actually be pretty strong. But the other nice thing about this, right, is that it doesn't have to be real non-token artifacts dying, and you have a bunch of stuff like treasure and blood and all that nonsense where you can just very easily put itself in the graveyard, and it makes the threat of activation very real on this card. Yeah, listen, it's quite a specific deck that wants this. You have to really care about doing the thing. This is not going to be one for every cube, but in the right spot, I could certainly see this doing a lot of work.
Yeah, I think it's a cool one. Our next card is kind of similar, but bigger, and therefore I think can get into more cubes. James, you want to talk about Ultron the Annihilator?
Yeah, for sure. Ultron the Annihilator is 3 black, so 5 mana total, for a 3/4 legendary artifact creature robot villain with flying. And whenever Ultron enters or attacks, create a 2/2 colorless robot villain artifact creature token. And whenever another artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, or an artifact card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This has loads of text. Most of it's pretty good. It's quite a lot of mana for a 3/4 flyer and a 2/2. If they answer it, you kind of don't feel like you got a great deal. Like, sure, you got a token out of it, but that's not amazing for your 5 mana. You're probably down a lot of mana there. But when it lives, it's going to be pretty powerful. Like, it's going to start creating these tokens. A common play pattern will be like, this has attacks because it's evasive. And then it's chucking out this board of tokens, which can then block on the ground. And as it blocks, those blocks are also killing your opponent because of a trigger. That all seems pretty nice. Listen, I think if you don't care a bunch about the artifact type specifically, then there are a lot of better 5-drops you could be putting in your black section. And honestly, how many 5-mana creatures does black want? But if you do care, this seems like a cool top end for that black artifact aggro deck.
No, I would agree that, yeah, this is very good in that deck, but like, I think this, similarly to the first Doctor Doom we spoke about, I think this is just a fine control top end. Like, it's better if you have more artifacts to go along with it, but like, it is kind of a self-contained engine. Like, it does make you the artifacts to then start pinging your opponents when they die. Again, that does sound more like more one for a slower cube. But like, this is one that kind of like, Ultron's auxiliary, the card we talked about beforehand, I want more artifact creatures to swing with my opponent. Like in this deck, I'm more just any artifacts, I think, make this better, because like, specifically with this, we make the 2/2s. If we do play a treasure, or like play something that makes a treasure, play a land as an artifact as well. Like, I think this one is a bit more generically artifact than just aggro artifacts, if that makes sense. And because it is that self-contained engine, I do think it could see play just as a control top end, as a decent flyer that gives you a bit of advantage as well.
Yeah, I guess for me it's one where I probably wouldn't put it in the cube if none of the black decks cared about artifacts, but At the
That's
point
fair.
where it's in the cube, I could certainly imagine drafting it for my control deck and being like, oh, I kind of need a top-end win condition. I'll play this guy.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think if all you care about is I want a 5-drop that can win the game for my black decks, like this is fine, but there are better ones, sort of thing.
No, I'd agree. Yeah, just cheaper, efficient things that kill people. Makes sense. All right, moving on to our last card of the day, we have Undead Hand Ninja. This is 1 and a black for a 2/1 creature zombie ninja villain with Death Touch, and whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is another card for that creatures leaving your graveyard deck. As you mentioned, the signpost for that is Insidious Roots. And as we're seeing in this set, we keep getting more cards for this deck. One thing that's important with this deck, though, is that you actually have creatures in it. Like, a lot of the payoffs, a lot of the engine cards are enchantments that then want you to run creatures. This is a creature that we can run in that deck, and it's also a payoff for it as well. So this can be the creature that we move in between zones with our Tortured Existence, or it can be the payoff that we actually put into play and then start draining people out. Like I don't think we've seen a drain effect for this deck before. Like, it's always been like make a token creature, or I know there's one that like gains you some life or something like that. But this is the first one actually kind of like this turns Tortured Existence into black mana, swap 2 creatures around, drain them for 1. That's actually that can become a win con. That's quite nice. This only goes in that deck. Only goes in that deck. It like, you need to be able to move things around zone very easily. It has Death Touch. That's nice, but for it to go in a cube, you are doing that deck in some way, and you're trying to support it as much as possible. And I like that we finally have another effect on a creature that's quite cheap to play.
Yeah, I think this card's solid. It's not drawing me into that deck in any way as a payoff, I don't think. This isn't the reason for me wanting to do this thing. I just think that...
Okay, but if you're in that deck, would you take it?
But if I'm in that deck, I would play this, because it also just, as a cheap Death Touch teacher, this is the sort of deck where you can get run over very easily, right? And this, you can just cast on turn 2, it's going to block, it's going to trade off, it's going to keep you alive, it's then a creature in your yard that comes back later. And some games that life drain will be really relevant, but I would just caveat that with this isn't a deck where you're getting in early damage, and it's hard to be, doing 20 with this, right? So I think most often it will be like you had one of the token makers, which tend to be the payoffs you want for this deck, and maybe this getting in like 4 or 5 points sort of speeds the clock up by a turn. But it's not I think, generally going to be your main game plan of how I'm killing my...
No, exactly. Yeah. We're still hoping to get the Insidious Roots and do things with that. But again, it's redundancy. That's the thing. I think this is from either the Commander set or from a deck that does this specifically in Jumpstart. It's redundancy, basically. They're trying to make it work in other formats. But yeah, cool one. I'm glad that they've got it. I also like the fact it's not blatantly a Marvel card, which is quite nice.
Yes, for sure. You could you could tell me this as being on a Magic plane.
Nice, marvellous. But yeah, I think that's all the cards. James, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, we covered a lot of good cards today.
Yeah, for sure. It was a pleasure. And we've got plenty left to cover next week, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you all very much for listening. Yeah, as James mentioned, next week we'll be touching on red, green, multicoloured, colourless, and some lands. So do make sure you like the podcast, give us a 5-star review, all that good stuff, so you get notified when next week's episode comes out. Until then, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. You all take care. Goodbye.